Hello, Incarnation third graders, and welcome to the last week of third grade. Can you believe we've made it? We are all so very proud of all the work you've done to finish your lessons here in the last 8 weeks of school. We are on the last story of your Journeys book, and I hope you enjoy it. This one is about climbing Mount Everest, and it is lesson 25, beginning on page 342 with our vocabulary. The first word is approached. Climbers approached this mountain from the west. Slowly, they got nearer to it. Approached, in that sentence, it says, got near to it. Approach means coming near. Number 2, section. The top section or part of the mountain is the steepest. Again, right in the sentence, section means part. In this story, there will be some climbers and they will climb this mountain by section. They can't do it all at once. It takes several weeks to climb each section. Number 3, avalanches. When avalanches occur, the powerful sliding snow can knock trees down. Right there in the sentence it says, powerful sliding snow. That is what, in fact, an avalanche is. Number 4, increases. When storms blow in, the danger to climbers increases or becomes greater. Right there in the sentence, the word increases means becomes greater. And we are going to learn about how just the wind could be very dangerous for the climbers. Number 5, equipment. Mountain climbers check their supplies or equipment before they climb. Equipment is the supplies they need. And we'll read a little bit about how the boy that was climbing Mount Everest, the first time he went up, he was not prepared with the correct equipment. And he had to then kind of abandon the task and go back another time with better equipment. Number 6, tanks. Tanks that hold oxygen help climbers breathe in the high, thin air. A tank is a container that holds the oxygen. Number 7, slopes. Gentle slopes near the bottom of the mountain are easiest to climb. Slopes means ground that is slanting upward or downward. It may not be very steep. It could be very shallow, but it also could be very steep. Slopes. Number 8, altitude. The altitude or height of Granite Peak in Montana is 12,799 feet high. Altitude right there in that sentence means height. Number 9, succeed. Everyone's goal is to reach the summit. If climbers plan well, they will succeed. Succeed means to reach your goal, to do what you planned out to do. Here you are at the end of third grade and you did in fact succeed. You met the goal of reaching the end of third grade. Halt. Climbers come to a halt when it gets dark. They stop for the night. Halt means to stop. Turn your books to page 345 while I read a little bit about mountains. Mountains are high, elevated landforms that are found all over the world. Some are high and snow-capped. Others are rounded and covered with trees. Still others are smoking volcanoes. The most common kind are fold mountains, such as the Alps in Europe. These were created long ago when two plates of the Earth's crust collided. In mountains, surviving on Mount Everest, you'll read about a 16-year-old boy who climbs Mount Everest, the tallest mountain on Earth. So I would like you to think about what you already know about a mountain, or maybe mountains that you have seen. Have you ever seen a mountain close to this high? Maybe if you've been to some of the national parks, you have seen some mountains, but not nearly anything quite this high. We are on page 346. This story is an informational text. It gives you facts about a topic. So as we read this, you will notice that there are headings that separate the story into sections. There's also a lot of real-life photographs and captions. There's also maybe diagrams and maps of where the hikers are climbing on Mount Everest. So this is in fact a true story. Lots of information here and real-life facts. If you like this story, check out some other ones by the author. The author is Michael Sandler. It says Michael Sandler enjoys extreme adventures. He loves to travel and has been to the foothills of Mount Everest, the highest mountain in the world. Several years ago, while touring Africa, he got lost in the Sahara, the world's largest desert. The adventure might have helped him later write Deserts, Surviving the Sahara. Other extreme books by Sandler include Oceans, Surviving in the Deep Sea, and Rainforests, Surviving in the Amazon. I imagine that all of those books are written in the same format as this one. Turn to page 347. You'll notice that there is in fact a real photograph on this page. And we're going to think about this story, mountains surviving on Mount Everest. And I would like you to think while you're reading this story, what would it be like to climb Mount Everest? Is this something that you might want to do in your life sometime? And when you think about climbing Mount Everest, remember that this is something that would take a year or more to prepare for. You wouldn't be able to just drive there and hike it. You would have to prepare your body and your strength and your equipment for the right extreme temperatures that are on Mount Everest. All right, let's read about the 16-year-old boy who attempted it. Page 348. You'll see the first heading is called Climbing Mount Everest. The clock showed almost midnight. The temperature was freezing. Icy winds roared by. A group of people huddled in the darkness on a rocky ridge. In moments, they would begin the final stage of the dangerous journey. They were climbing to the top of Mount Everest, the world's highest mountain. So you can see that they're starting their climb at midnight because they know it's going to take a lot of time to get there. The first leg, it might be best to do here as the sun warms them up. You can also tell from that little bit that Mount Everest is in fact a very tall, steep, snowy mountain. Page 349. Among the climbers was Temba Shuri Sherpa. Just 2 weeks before, Temba had celebrated his 16th birthday. Now he was trying to survive in one of the world's most extreme places. Making it to the top of Everest was Temba's dream. He would be the youngest person ever to reach the summit, which was 29,035 feet. Page 350. So let's think about a 16-year-old here. When you're 16, you're only about a sophomore in high school. So you are not yet an adult, but obviously he has a dream to climb Mount Everest. Page 350. Another heading, What are mountains? So now we're going to backtrack and learn a little bit about this mountain. Mountains are a type of landform. They rise high above the area around them. Mountains are taller than hills. They can rise thousands of feet in the air. They are found all over the world, even beneath the sea. A group of mountains is called a range. The biggest mountain range in North America is the Rocky Mountains. The Andes in South America is the world's longest mountain range. So if you look at the map that they show at the bottom, you can see on the far left side of North America is the Rocky Mountains. And if you look below that in South America, there's the Andes Mountains. So the Andes Mountains are actually the largest, the longest mountain range in the world. You'll also remember some of those terms from our early social study days in 3rd grade where we learned about landforms and a mountain being a landform, and a bunch of mountains together is called a range. Mount Everest, the mountain Tempa is climbing, is the part of the Himalaya Mountains. The name Himalaya means home of snow. This Asian range is the world's highest. It includes 9 of the 10 tallest mountains on Earth. So down at the bottom on page 351, there's a fun fact. Mount Everest covers 1/4 of the Earth's land surface. That's interesting to know. Please turn to page 352. Another heading in this story, reminding us that it's an informational text. Mountain conditions. As Tempa approached Everest summit, survival became harder and harder. Mountain conditions get more extreme and mountain conditions get more extreme the higher a person climbs. Air contains less and less oxygen as the altitude increases. Breathing becomes nearly impossible. Thin air can cause headaches and dizziness at 10,000 feet. Higher up, it can be deadly. Humans cannot survive for long at the top of the section of mountains like Everest. Hurricane-forced winds can reach 130 miles per hour. Temperatures can plummet to -100 degrees Fahrenheit during the night. Blowing snow makes it harder to see. Tempa was headed here. So obviously, you have to think that you have to prepare for those temperatures. You have to prepare with your gear and covering your body and having food and oxygen tanks. There's a fact there on that page with the little globe. Frostbite can happen when it's so cold that hands and feet and other parts of the body freeze solid. Frostbite can cause people to lose fingers, toes, and even their noses. Page 353. Why do people climb mountains? People climb mountains for many reasons. Some enjoy the thrill of being high above the clouds. Others like the challenge of testing their skills. For decades, however, reaching the top of Everest was a test that no climber could pass. The first attempt to climb Everest was made during the 1920s. Again and again, the climbing team stopped short of their goal. Avalanches, storms, sicknesses, and exhaustion brought them to a halt. Then, in 1953, 2 climbers finally succeeded, Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. Hillary was from New Zealand, and Norgay was a Sherpa from Nepal. And there's a picture there of those 2 explorers that finally did succeed. So what does Tempa have in common with these 2 climbers? And that is that they all tried to sort of reach the mountain, but they couldn't make it the first time. Tempa's mistake. Page 354. Tempa had tried to climb Mount Everest before. It ended, however, in failure. I didn't have the training or proper equipment, Tempa said. He was almost at the summit when his oxygen supply ran out. Without oxygen, Tempa couldn't think clearly. He made a terrible mistake. He took off his gloves to tie his boots. His fingers froze. Tempa suffered frostbite on both hands. He had to turn back just 70 feet shy from his goal. The next time around, however, Tempa was prepared. He had trained hard. He had the right equipment thanks to his classmates and his teachers. They had raised money for his trip. So obviously he was determined to get to the top of Everest. And so he set out to purchase and get all the equipment he needed and be more prepared. And here in this box is some of the survival equipment that he brought. Survival equipment. Climbing suit to protect against the cold. Gloves to keep your hands warm and dry. Goggles to protect your eyes from the sun's harmful rays and the reflection of the snow. Oxygen mask and tank for breathing at the highest altitudes. Ice axe to help climb slopes and break up the ice. Climbing ropes to climb up slopes. Trekking poles to help a climber stay balanced. And mountain boots with spikes that dig into the snow and ice. Page 355. camp to camp. Temba's second try began on April 2001. Mount Everest sits between Nepal and Tibet. There are several different routes to the top. Temba would take a route from the north, the Tibetan side. Climbers moved from one camp to the next, higher one, and then rest for a while. At each camp, their bodies get used to the higher altitudes. Temba spent several weeks moving between camps with his team. At Camp 3, the team waited for a break in the weather. Winter was over, but there had been a series of severe snowstorms. Getting caught in a snowstorm further up the mountain could be deadly. There's a fact at the bottom with the globe. The climb up Everest officially begins at base camp. Climbers stay in tents there so their bodies get used to the lower levels of oxygen. And you can see how Temba has mapped out all the places he's going to camp. And sometimes they stay there for several days or maybe a week so that their body can adjust to the temperature and the oxygen levels that would be needed to keep going to the summit of the mountain. Page 356. The heading says, "The Climb Along the Ridge." On May 20th, Temba's team reached Camp 4. Then the climbers headed out to the great ridge leading to the summit. Temba plunged his axe into ice walls, pulling himself up. He steadied himself against 50-mile-per-hour winds, yet he climbed higher and higher. Temba had to move fast or die. Darkness stopped him before he got to Camp 5. His team had gone ahead. Luckily, Temba found a tent. He spent the night frightened and alone. The next day, Temba rejoined his team. They reached Camp 6, one day's climb from their goal. So I think that was a tough decision for Temba to stop by himself and set up a camp. But it probably was the smartest one because he knew he wouldn't make it to his teammates by the time that the sun set and it really started to drop in temperature. Page 357. Climbers have to be very careful. Towers of ice can fall over without warning. And there is a picture. You can see that those climbers, it does not look like they're having an easy time getting up that ice hill. And they are very, very prepared with all of their equipment. At the bottom of the page it says, climbers use aluminum ladders to cross deep cracks in the ice, called crevices. The crevices are constantly opening and closing, so it is very dangerous. I didn't realize they had to bring aluminum ladders with them, or maybe they have them stashed someplace on the mountain. But that would be a heavy load in your backpack. Page 358. Reaching the top of the world. Just before midnight, Temba began his final climb. A headlamp lit the darkness. An oxygen mask helped Temba to breathe. Sometimes he'd stop to rest or to change oxygen bottles. Just after sunrise, Temba reached Mount Everest summit. He was higher than anyone else on the planet. Temba planted 2 flags, one for his school and the other was for Nepal. "I felt so happy," he said. You can tell that when even just that last bit of climbing, he started just before midnight and he didn't finish until sunrise. So there was probably 6 hours or so of climbing that he still had to do to reach the top. Down at the bottom it says, it is dangerous for climbers to spend more than 10 minutes at the top of Everest. The body needs to get to lower altitude where there is more oxygen. I found that fact very interesting because of how long it takes them to get to the top. The journey is weeks, maybe a month long, and then they have to pay attention to only staying there for 10 minutes just to be safe. And there's a picture, real-life picture of Temba, was the youngest person to climb Mount Everest. So he did, in fact, meet his goal. Page 360. Will the mountain survive? Temba survived in the mountains. Now he wants to make sure the mountains survive. The world's mountains face many different threats. Trash is one problem. For a while, Everest was called the world's highest garbage dump. The mountains were littered with tons of trash that climbers had left behind, batteries and bottles, and even empty oxygen tanks. Many climbers didn't have the time or the strength to carry these items back down with them when they came. So that's kind of hard to think about, that such a beautiful place would be so consumed with garbage and trash. But you can also realize that these climbers are putting their bodies to an extreme test, and bringing those items back down would be very difficult. The caption on the picture says, "Climbers have left garbage on Everest since 1921. Now people are trying to clean up the mess," which I think is a good goal. Page 361. Global warming is another problem. As the earth gets warmer, mountain glaciers are melting. Himalaya lakes are swelling up with water. When they flooded, mountain landscapes will change forever. In 2005, the snowcap of Tanzania's Mount Kilimanjaro melted for the first time in history. So that is sad. That's all from global warming. The final page. We're on 362. After the climb, when Temba came down from Everest, he was thinking about food, not fame. After weeks of camping, he was starving for home cooking. Still, when he flew home to Kathmandu, a huge crowd was waiting. Temba couldn't believe it. "I had never seen so many cameras. All of them were pointing at me," he said. Despite the attention, Temba focused on his schoolwork. He needed a good education to achieve another dream, starting a school in Dakola. Will Temba succeed? Only time will tell. If you survived on Everest, however, and reached the top, no goal seems too high. And there's a picture of Temba. Temba smiled as supporters who greeted him at the airport after he successfully climbed Mount Everest. So you can see that that's a very inspirational story, that he did not succeed the first time and it was such a huge task, but in the end he did persevere and go back and achieve his dream. And now he's in school to achieve yet another dream of starting a school. Okay, like last week, the assignment with this story is taking an online assessment. Much like last week, you can find that in the link on your lesson plans. Mrs. Frazee also did a video just showing you how to get into the online assessments. So please read this story 2 more times, maybe listen to it 1 time, and then read it with a parent or an older sibling. And then you will be done with your 3rd grade reading book. Happy reading!